The Spell of the Sorcerer's Skull by John Bellairs, Chapter 3. Johnny gazed horror-struck as he watched the picture in the mirror dissolved into rising curls of steam. The steam evaporated and Johnny was looking at his own frightened face. Somehow he got out of the room. He galloped down the hall, down the stairs and out the back door, slamming it hard behind him. Outside, under the cold stars again, he halted. His face was streaming with sweat, and he was breathing hard. "What can I do? What can I do? What—" Johnny babbled hysterically, then he pulled himself together. There was nothing he could do, not right away. Something awful, something supernatural had happened to the professor, but at least he was alive. If he weren't, he would not have been able to speak to Johnny from the mirror. But where was he? In outer space? In another dimension? Buried deep under the earth? Where? And what did his disappearance have to do with the ghostly scene that Johnny had seen in the Fitzwilliam Inn? Johnny had no answer to any of these questions. He was totally, thoroughly stumped. Suddenly, Johnny realized that he was supposed to be home. His grandmother always worried about him when he was out at night. By now, she would be phoning A sound interrupted Johnny's thoughts. It was a phone ringing inside the professor's house. He knew who that was. Throwing a quick glance at the silent, empty house, he set out for home on the run. Grandma was waiting for him on the front steps. The porch light was on, and he could see plainly that she was not in a good mood. Grandma was frowning darkly, and her arms were folded across the front of her apron. "John Dixon," she said angrily, "what on earth do you mean by staying out so late? I've been worried sick about you. I called the movie theater and—" "Grandma," said Johnny, cutting her off excitedly, "there's something wrong across the street. The professor's gone. He's disappeared." Grandma snorted skeptically. "I'll just bet he has. Young man, is that the best excuse you can come up with, eh?" Johnny's heart sank. He felt utterly helpless. How was he ever going to explain to his grandmother what he had seen? Grandma was superstitious, but she would hardly believe what he had told her. What would she say if he started talking about phantom jack-o'-lanterns and ghostly faces in mirrors? Johnny hung his head and looked ashamed. I'm sorry I stayed out late," he said in a low, hesitant voice. "I forgot what time it was, and I had a question about my schoolwork, and I wanted to ask the professor. Oh, I won't do it again. Please don't be angry." Grandma's harsh look softened. She smiled and opened the screen door for Johnny. "All right, young man," she said, trying hard to sound stern and forbidding. "But don't let this kind of behavior turn into a habit. You run on upstairs and brush your teeth and wash your face and get off to bed. It's going to be rise and shine early tomorrow morning, so you better catch some shut-eye." "He really is gone, Grandma," said Johnny, glancing quickly at the old woman. "The professor, I mean. He's not there." Grandma shrugged. "Old bachelors like him keep funny kinds of hours," she said, as she hooked the screen. "If you're all by yourself, you can stay up all night and nobody'll mind. But don't you worry, he'll be coming out of that front door in the early a.m., just like he always does." Johnny shook his head gloomily. After what he had seen, he knew very well that the professor was not going to be there tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. Johnny felt horribly frustrated. He wanted to yell that she was wrong. He wanted to tell her that witchcraft and dark, mysterious forces were involved in the professor's disappearance. But with a mighty effort, he forced his feelings back down inside. Grimly, he plodded up the stairs. He went to his room and put on his pajamas. After brushing his teeth, he flung himself into bed and lay there, wide-eyed, waiting for the sleep that he knew was not going to come. All that night, Johnny tossed and turned. Again and again, the professor's tormented face appeared before him. "Help me! Help me!" And Johnny wanted to scream back at him, "How? How am I going to help you? I don't even know where you are!" Twice he jumped out of bed and ran to the window to stare wildly at the professor's house. He kept hoping he would see his old friend come ambling up the walk, but the street lamp threw its cold light on the empty sidewalk, and the professor's house stayed dark. Back in bed again, Johnny tried a new angle. Had he been hallucinating? The mind could play tricks, he knew that. But he was so utterly sure that he had seen the face in the mirror. And then there was the jack-o'-lantern. Fergie had seen it too, and on top of everything else, Johnny still had the nagging feeling that the vision he had seen in the Fitzwilliam Inn, the vision that he couldn't tell the professor about, had something to do with this mystery. Some evil force had kept him from telling the professor about the ghastly scene he had witnessed. Why? If the professor had known about the vision, would he have guessed about what was going to happen to him? Nothing made any sense to Johnny at this point. In his mind, he He feverishly chased old clocks and inns and grinning jack-o'-lanterns around and around and around. When dawn came, he felt exhausted, as if he had been running for miles. He also felt heartsick. He knew his dear old friend was gone, and he wondered if he would ever see him again. In the morning, Johnny was so socked that he hardly knew what he was doing. He clumped down the front staircase slowly, as if there were weights on his feet. When he reached the bottom, he saw the front door was open. Grandpa was standing on the porch, taking in the morning air. He was a tall, stooped, friendly old man in his mid-70s, and he wore gray work shirts and gray wash pants all the time. Instead of heading out to the kitchen for breakfast, Johnny decided that he would go out and talk to Grandpa for a minute, and he was desperately hoping that he would see the professor come out of his house as usual and get into his car and drive off to the college to teach his Saturday morning world history class. Grandpa turned as he heard the porch boards creak behind him. "Oh, hi, Johnny," he said with a little wave of his hand. "Nice morning, huh?" "Uh-huh," said Johnny, and he forced himself to smile. He stepped out onto the front stoop and stood next to Grandpa. Putting his hands in his pockets, he tried to act casual, but he wasn't really nonchalant. He was terribly interested in seeing signs of life across the street. Straining his eyes, he tried to see through the dingy windows of the professor's garage door, but it was impossible for him to tell if the old beat-up Pontiac was in or out. "Has the professor left yet?" he asked in a tense voice. Grandpa frowned and shook his head. "Nope. He might be sick today, or else maybe he finally got rid of that Saturday class of his. Funny, though. Most of the time he's up and out by now." Again, Johnny experienced that sick feeling rising inside him. He felt totally helpless. He wanted to drag Grandpa across the street and make him search the professor's house. But what good would that do? Johnny felt uncontrollable tears welling up inside him. Abruptly, he turned and ran inside, and Grandpa watched him go, with a wondering frown on his face. Somehow, Johnny got through breakfast. Then an idea hit him. He would call up Fergie and get him to meet him. Skeptic or no skeptic, Fergie was his best friend. He was going to have to listen to his story. "Hello, Ferguson residence, Byron speaking." Fergie sounded grumpy, but then he always did in the morning. Johnny had been to Boy Scout camp with Fergie, and he knew he was the slowest waker-upper in the world. "Hi, it's me, John. Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Yeah, I guess so. I was just on my way out the door, so what's up?" "I want you to meet me down at Peter's sweet shop. Right away. I've got something I have to talk to you about." Fergie snickered. "What is it? You getting married? You want my advice about your love life?" Now Johnny felt irritated. Fergie knew that he was shy with girls, and he liked to kid about it. "No, it isn't that, lover boy. So can you meet me or not?" "Yeah, sure, I'll meet you," said Fergie amiably. "See you later," and he hung up. Peter's sweet shop was an old-fashioned soda fountain with a marble counter and high stools and deep wooden booths with curly sides. There were colored glass lamps and a jukebox, plus a display case up in front with boxes of candy in it. The kids of Dunstan Heights came to Peter's all the time after school and on weekends to eat hot fudge sundaes and slurp sodas and other gooey treats. As soon as he could get away from the house, Johnny headed straight down there. When he arrived, he found Fergie perched on a stool drinking a cherry Coke. "Hi, Dixon," he said, smiling sarcastically. "So what's the big deal? Government secrets? Are you a commie? And you want to confess to me?" Johnny frowned. He was not in the mood for kidding. "Come on," he muttered, motioning toward the back of the store. "Let's get a booth, and I'll tell you the whole deal." Fergie followed Johnny to the back of the shop. They slid into one of the booths, and a waitress came over and asked them their order. Fergie ordered a dish of fudge ripple ice cream to go with his Coke, and Johnny asked for a chocolate frappe. The waitress went away, and Johnny eyed Fergie nervously. How was he going to manage to tell him this strange, unlikely tale? "Well?" said Fergie, grinning expectantly. Johnny squirmed in his seat. He folded and unfolded his hands and stared hard at the Formica tabletop. "Look," he began slowly, you remember that jack-o'-lantern we were talking about?" Fergie groaned and covered his face with his hands. "Oh, no, Dixon, come off it. Not that jack-o'-lantern business again. Can't you just—" "No, I can't. This is serious business, Fergie. So just be quiet and listen or else leave." Color had flooded into Johnny's face, and he looked wild. Fergie was startled. Most of the time, Johnny was a mild-mannered, timid kid. This outburst caught Fergie off guard. Now he was the one who felt shy and nervous. "Okay, okay," said Fergie softly. "Don't have a fit. Just tell me what you want to tell me." So Johnny told him about seeing the jack-o'-lantern again, and about what he found when he entered the professor's dark, silent house. He didn't leave anything out, and as he plunged headlong through the tale, he kept thinking, "I don't care if he thinks I'm crazy. I've got to tell him." Finally, he was done. He sat back, tense and expectant. What would Fergie say? At first, Fergie was silent, though he never would have admitted it. Tales of the supernatural fascinated him. On the other hand, he wasn't going to swallow every wild tale his friend threw at him. He wanted some kind of proof before he accepted anything. Fergie folded his hands and cracked his knuckles. He gazed out the window and tried to act skeptical and calm. "Look, Dixon," he said quietly, "you don't want to go flying off the handle. I mean, you might have seen something, but on the other hand, you might have got panicky and imagined you saw something. No offense meant, but I think that's possible." Johnny glared at Fergie. "I didn't imagine anything, and I saw what I saw. Now, are you going to help me or not?" Fergie threw Johnny a quick, frightened glance. He had never seen Johnny act quite so forceful and downright certain before. This helped convince Fergie that Johnny's tale might possibly be true. "Oh, okay," said Fergie, slamming his hand down hard on the table. "I feel like it don't, but I guess I have to help you. What do you think we ought to do?" This question took Johnny by surprise. He really didn't have a plan of any kind. "I don't know," he said sheepishly. "I thought you might have some kind of an idea." Fergie grinned. "What do you think I look like, Sherlock Holmes or something?" Seeing that Johnny was not amused, Fergie grew serious again. He drummed his fingers on the tabletop and stared hard at the melting ice cream in front of him. "Okay," he said wearily, "here's what I think. If the prof's really gone off into Dimension X or out to Mars, we aren't going to get him back in a hurry. I mean, are we?" Johnny shook his head glumly. "Nope," he said. "But," said Fergie, stabbing a forefinger at Johnny, "but still and even if he might be somewheres right on this earth, mightn't he?" Johnny nodded. "Right," said Fergie. His eyes shone, and he acted agitated as he always did when he was putting a logical train of thought together. "Okay, then. We have to find out where he is. And even if he's off with the mullygrubs on another planet, maybe we can figure out some way to bring him back. I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible.